Well, good morning, everyone. My name is John Goodgame. I'm a sales engineer working out of the Cambridge office for InterSystems, and welcome to Java Business Hosts. Today, what I really want to do is make sure that by the time you get out of the session, if you are an Ensemble developer currently, a soon-to-be Iris Data Platform-Interoperability developer, that you'll know what you need to do in order to implement a Java Business Host. And if you're a Java developer, you should know by the time you leave here what's required in order to provide jar files to the developers so that they can bring those applications in. So what we will not be doing, I am not a Java programmer. We will not be learning Java in this session. But we'll spend a little bit of time showing you what's required to compile the jar files. Also, on the other side, if you're looking to learn Ensemble or the Iris Data Platform Interoperability, we're not going to spend a ton of time doing data transformations or any of those kinds of things. It's really, the goal of this is to have you understand what you need to do just to get the Java Business Host up and running. So today's session, we're going to do a quick overview of Ensemble. We'll talk about specific issues as they relate to Java development houses and how to create and deploy the Java business services and operations, of course, with a couple of demonstrations on doing this. And then we'll do a brief summary followed by a Q&A. So InterSystems Iris interoperability is designed for simplicity and control. It provides you with an environment that allows for consistent, rapid application development, flexible data modeling, and the ability to import and export schemas, and it provides high performance for large enterprises. So we're going to talk briefly about what's inside the interoperability in terms of design. So you have external systems communicating with what we call a production. Inside a production, basically, it has all the components for an interface, more or less. So the external systems communicate through inbound adapters into business services, which are the inbound data components. And then there's a business process in the middle, which is data transformations. It could be workflow. So, that's where you do your manipulation, if you will. And then the business operation is the outbound side where you're sending data out. Also using outbound adapters, which could be FTP, TCP/IP, it could be ODBC, whatever. Basically any kind of communication protocol. And that then it applies to the external systems. So, leveraging the interoperability features. This is an Ensemble production, just sort of what I just described to you in that diagram. We're just going to take a quick look so for those of you who may not be using this currently, at least you have some understanding of what we're actually working with and what we're trying to leverage inside of Iris, because again, this is the Ensemble production, but Iris is leveraging all of that as well. So the Ensemble tools and features are the best, as was said in the keynote, the best features were brought into Iris. So we're going to take a quick look at this. So again, services, those are where information's coming in. They're using an adapter. Processes are where you're manipulating your data, workflow engine, transformations, and then of course your operations are your outbound side. On the process side, you can do routing rules, so you can do one to many. You could do many to one, but just as an example, you have something coming in, you might be sending it to 10 places. Again, the routing rule itself is basically a conditional where you can say, on this constraint, a certain kind of message I want to send to a certain location, and you can do filtering based on conditions. And you can also do transformations here, and here you place your target, or you do a transformation, which is basically manipulating data from one format to another. This is something where you might do a drag and drop, where you have a schema on the left, a schema on the right, And you're basically taking that information and converting it from one to another format. Again, you can do this drag and drop. You could set a specific value if you want. Basically, in this case, it's set to test, and you have built-in functions and features that a world-class engine has, so you can do a lot of the manipulation right inside Ensemble, or in this case, Iris Data Platform. So why move Java code into Business Host? You probably have people who are building Java applications, and you're probably happy with them. But when you think about supporting 100 different Java applications, what's the consistency? How do you deal with high availability? How do you resend messages? And each one may be different. So when you think about bringing your applications into the data platform, you should be thinking in terms of what's it really take. You may have a piece of Java code that's doing a great job, but at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, is someone there, or is it only the programmer who knows how to fix it? So there are times where you're going to want that high availability, or maybe you need to edit and resend messages, but there's a whole list of reasons why you would want to do this. Consistency, reliability, but I would say, one of the biggest features for this would be that, you have auditability too. So if someone's saying, I'm not receiving information, or I'm not, something's not working right, you actually can go and look the same way you would on any other interface and be able to use those tools. So the problem for the job houses has basically been that, Ensemble is a very powerful tool. It's, world-class engine. And now what's been brought into Iris, the InterSystems Iris Data Platform, has all these capabilities, but, you've had to go in and work in ObjectScript, which is, your Java programmers are probably sitting there thinking, I don't want to learn a whole new language. This is inconvenient. So the libraries that are available within Java as well, you have a ton of libraries. And you also have other protocols that maybe aren't out of the box inside the data platform. So also Java resources are easy to find. There's lots of Java programmers, and again, tons of libraries. So the solution would be for you to be able to leverage those libraries, right? To be able to bring those libraries into the engine so that you could actually use those without having to write a bunch of ObjectScript. So you want to utilize the skills of your current resources and take advantage of the reliability and the flexibility of the engine. So again, Java Business Host basically looks very similar to the earlier diagram. We have the external services, an application. You bring it into the InterSystems Iris Data Platform, and it will outbound the message to another Java application if you so wish, or it could be going somewhere else. Keep in mind, this is by doing this and by putting the information inside that middle box, which is the interoperability, you do get all those other features. You really do get the messaging, you do get the ability to do transformations and maybe routing to multiple locations, and that puts your integration team in control of, if you have an application, suddenly you want to send it to 5 other places, you don't necessarily have to have a Java programmer come in and write code to handle that. So the steps for creating Java Business Hosts. One is that you implement the business service and operation in Java, which basically means you write Java code and create a jar file. But you are implementing certain methods from libraries that we provide to you when you install Iris, or InterSystems Iris. Then you deploy that into the Iris Data Platform. And simple steps: verify your Java's running, create new productions, or add it to an existing one. And then there's a Java Gateway.Initiator. And this sounds like it's complicated, but in a second we're going to do a demo of it. And there were gateway features that, if you've been working with Ensemble in the past, sometimes they get a little confusing. This is very simple, it's very straightforward, and we're going to just go through some of those steps. So these are the classes that need to be implemented into the Java code. This is actually fairly simple. You have the on-init and on-teardown methods in both of them, but at the bottom here, and you send requests on the service, but on the operation you also have another one which is on message processing, so when it receives the message. So let's go through the first demo. We're going to open Eclipse. I could use Atelier, but I wanted to emphasize that I'm creating a new production or a new project here called Hello. And we're going to add the libraries that we talked about, the cache gateway library, 2.0.0. And we're going to add the class for both the business service and the hello business service. And we will add the class for hello business operation as well, but we're going to implement that business service that we talked about earlier. So again, you basically type in implements, and then you can like Eclipse or another tool of your choice allow you to implement those libraries and pull in the methods. We're going to cut and paste some code here. Very simple hello world, nothing fancy. It's not about the code today. It's about knowing how to implement this. So we're just replacing those methods with just a little more code that just sends a hello world. Now we'll add the business operation class, hello business operation. And again, we need to implement that. And it helps if you can spell correctly. The Eclipse bug. If you see that on Eclipse, you have to go back and forth from the tab, and then it'll recognize it. And we're going to implement those methods, and again, we'll do some cutting and pasting. Fairly simple, just to write out to a log. So we're just importing references here. Okay. All right, so there's also a settings here for a log file. So settings are actually going to show up later in this case, the business operation. We're going to export this to a jar file. Don't worry, don't spend a ton of time in this code. It won't be all about coding. So now we're creating the business service jar file. Okay. All right, so Basically what we just did was we just went into Eclipse and we built two jar files. We implemented the methods. We used a library from Cache, and we implemented the methods from that library. If you're not a Java programmer, you don't have to worry about this, but the Java programmers will easily recognize what I just did, and they understand that I'm basically bringing in those libraries, importing the methods from those libraries, and then using those and inputting my code in between the methods that are available for the jar files for the business host. So I'm using Hello World as a simple example. It could be doing anything. It could be doing stock quotes. It could be doing HL7. It could be doing anything. But the point is that these are the methods that you have to import and use in order to expose it to the data platform. So let's create, let's just check and see if Java's running. First things first. So we got a version back. We know our job is running. We're going to create some credentials here. Basically, the service coming in is going to have to be able to be recognized in terms of who's using the service. So we're just doing a simple credential using our default user in this case. And there. So we have our credentials, and we'll use this in just a little bit. You'll see that I'll put in hello as the default credential in just a second. So now we want to add the initiator to the production. So in the past, you'd have to go in and build the gateway yourself. In this case, now there's actually a nice little tool that will bring this in and start it up for you. And we're basically going to build the Java business host. And we'll start a new production. We'll just call this Java business host, or abbreviate it. There we go. And again, the production is running now. It just created that production. It's running. I'm going to browse to the jar files that we created just a few minutes ago, and I'm going to bring them in and create the Java class for the business service. And here's the credentials. We'll just drop those in. Continue. So this is generating the actual components that we're going to be using so that we can implement them. And we'll just go ahead and do the business operation while we're in here. There we go. All right. So at this point, we've created a production. We've put the gateway on the production. It's up and running. And we've created the components that you're going to use for the business service and operation. They are not yet on the production. So let's go with looking at that production. So it's up and running. There's the initiator gateway. Let's go ahead and put those components that we just generated in. There's our business service. Is that our operation? Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and add that log that was in, yep, there we go. So again, this was a setting within the Java code that allowed this to be one of the things that we can fill in. Just go ahead and enable that. And then we'll need to point this service to the target of the Java business host operation. Enable that. All right. So we've actually just created an interface using Java and Iris. So if you think about that, and obviously Java code, you could be doing all sorts of things. It could be much more complicated. But the actual steps to create your Java business host are fairly simple. And I'm going to go ahead and go right here and just check and see. Oh, we went back. So, yeah, so we got this. Let's verify. So here we are. We're just going to look at the messages that are processing. And just verify that we're seeing hello world come through the system. So what we did, we generated the Java Gateway-Initiator. We generated the business host, both service and operation. We added those to the production. The production was already started for us, really. And we verified those messages are actually being processed. What we did not do is more important. We didn't have to drop into ObjectScript. We didn't have to do any customizations from the data platform side. So, you know, for those of you who have looked at this and at times thought, well, I would do this, except I have to go in and I have to learn some ObjectScript and I have to build something that's custom and I'm not quite sure how the connections might work. This sort of opens a whole new world for you, because basically your Java programmers just need to implement those methods, and basically using a GUI, you're able to bring those in and use them. All right. So at some point, you're going to want to apply changes. So I wanted to show you not only how easy it is to bring your Java code into the Iris data platform, the InterSystems Iris data platform, but also at some point you're going to want to alter the code. And what's required to alter the code? I'm actually going to use a different tool to edit code this time, because it doesn't really matter. And the reason I didn't use Atelier isn't because it can't do it. It's because your programmers may be using Eclipse already. And I wanted you to know that there's no tie between using Atelier and developing this, or Eclipse, or CodeWriter, or any other tool that you want. It's really about the jar file and about having those libraries and methods. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Open up CodeWriter. These are the, now I will say, I did a little bait and switch here. This is more intensive code, which I didn't really show you because it's not about the code today. But basically, there are a few little items that were changed in terms of what we originally generated. What is added is that we have a few settings here, a min and max setting, which we wanted to show up in the service. And also, we have a randomizer, which basically just generates a random number. So this is more Java code. And again, I didn't want to spend my time doing Java code here. But you can see that there's a min and max setting that basically is being evaluated. The default was 0 to 100. So the code's running right now is only allowing 0 to 100 for this random number. And again, here's the hello world piece that I'm sending. But we're going to do something a little more interesting anyway. We're going to change it so that we can generate a lucky number along with hello world. So I'll go ahead and save this. And again, it's not so much about the code today as it is about the process. So I want you to understand the process here. I'm doing this from the Java instance in my machine, as opposed to going in Eclipse and generating it. I'm just going to generate the code, and this will be on the slides later if you want to see them. So don't worry about what it's actually saying, but I'm basically compiling the code. And creating the jar files, just using a different method. And again, it doesn't matter which method you use, and that's sort of the point of this, is that you can do this either way. It doesn't really matter. It's the jar file that's important, those methods that are important. So we're going to take the business service that was generated, and we're going to move it into the location that we imported the original jar file. Okay. Now we're going to stop the operation, just not to throw an error, basically. And we're going to restart the initiator. And then we'll restart this operation. Okay. And we'll look at those messages that are coming through now. And again, all we did was change it to generate a lucky number. And as you notice, on the data platform side, there's really not much to do. You're really just reapplying the jar file. So, and the only way you're doing that is by moving it to the location, and you're just restarting the initiator gateway, the Gateway.Initiator, and then it's really you're applying that code change. So again, what did we do? We altered the Java code for the business service. We compiled the Java classes. We created the new jar file, replaced the old one, stopped the operation, restarted the initiator, verified the messages are processing with the new code. And again, what we didn't do is more important. We did not drop into object script. So basically this interface is up and running with a Java programmer writing a bunch of code. It, again, could be doing anything. And really he's controlling what's being brought in terms of the input and the output. But the people who are doing the data platform interoperability could be doing all sorts of things as well. And that's why I wanted to show you at the beginning about how we have transformations, we have routing rules, we have all these other things that are now part of this engine. This is a world-class engine. You've got high availability, you know, the mirroring, all those things that you would expect for any kind of communication you're doing for a large institution are now baked into when you build your Java application. So we'll go to the next thing. All right. So using custom settings, I briefly touched on this, the min-max, and we actually have the log file as a custom setting as well. So the Java programmer may know that he wants to be able to give the data platform, developer the options of doing certain things. So by putting those settings in his code, they appear in the services and operations, and you're able to alter them from within the data platform. So here we go. With the business service, earlier I showed you min and max. Those were set as a default from 0 to 100. And even in our hello world that we looked at, and we're setting this to 200 and 500. In the hello world that we looked at with the lucky number, I think it was 73, but it was within 0 to 100. So let's look at the messages processing now. And here we go. We fall within the 200 to 500. So the Java developer has given you the option of being able to, and we'll go a few messages back. You can see the old one. It was it 42? So the Java developer, realized that you may need a setting, and of course I'm using min-max, but it could be any number of things. But the idea is that the Java developer has that ability to provide certain things that maybe is required for the outside application, and maybe you need to put in some parameter that Java application needs. Again, very simple example, but it could be that you have 10 settings or 15 settings, and maybe there's something that's really important in terms of how the application behaves. And so the Java programmer is able to pass that along to someone who's doing the implementation on the Iris side to be able to alter the code or how it behaves. So let's see. So let's look at, there was a log file in here. Take a quick look at this. the min-max setting in the code. I think we looked at that, but let's just take a peek. So down here, yeah, there's the settings. That's where those were set to show up in the service. And in here, you can see that's 0 to 100 is the default, and then it evaluates if you have a value in those. So it's actually receiving that information back out of the data platform. Let's see. Yep. Right. And again, there was a log that was part of the settings that we created a log of the messages that were coming through. And again, you can see initially they're all in 0 to 100, and then as we make changes, oh, you saw some of my earlier testing. As we made changes, they drop in between the 200 and 500 that we put in later. All right, so to summarize, the Java business hosts allow you to easily implement solutions using Java-only code. Your Iris Data Platform interoperability developers really are able to bring that code in and do it in such a way that you don't have to drop into ObjectScript. You don't have to do any type of development. You're really able to use what the Java developer has deemed necessary in terms of settings, and you're able to do this without having to drop into ObjectScript at all. Again, the complex solutions without having to change your resources too. So you don't have to have people go get trained in ObjectScript, and at the same time your current integration team would be more than capable of bringing those pieces of code in and using them. So, questions? Great. I'm glad Stefan just walked in, though, just in case. Stefan's, oh, yep.
Can you extend any of these to business processes?
So can the Java, well, it's really meant for the service and operation. The business process is used for the manipulation. I would think you would do it in your Java code, but could you, if you wanted to for some reason, could you do it some other way? Stefan? Yeah. So you would either alter it on the service and operation, or you would just use the tools within the data platform. Any other questions? Yes?
Is it just the cache kit that we're limited to, or can we work with other software development kits?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So you're saying in terms of bringing in the Java?
In terms of importing Java.
So this is only in the Iris Data Platform interoperability. Now, I don't know if there's plans to do anything else with it beyond that. Anything else?
This is
Iris only. Anything else? All right. For more information, obviously, learning services, you can go to the site, and this will be posted eventually. There'll be more information there as well. Obviously, visit the Tech Exchange. There'll be documentation as this is brought out, and obviously you can talk to one of your sales engineers, and they can get you more information as it becomes available. And again, this is early on. Certainly something that we look forward to people starting to use, but hopefully we at least address the concerns that people have in terms of possibly bringing Java code in that's actually fairly simple. And hopefully the people who do Java look at it and say, I really only have to point to a library and import methods, and the people who are on the integration side realize that they aren't going to have to do anything that's out of the ordinary. It's really a GUI. Oh, wrong way. So please complete the survey. I would appreciate that. And thank you.